In 1955, Chrysler built a car so fast that it won almost every NASCAR race it entered that year. Now, if you're old enough to remember 1955, you also remember that Chrysler was not exactly the car people got excited about. It was the car your accountant drove to church on Sunday and parked very carefully between the lines. But in 1955, something completely different happened. Chrysler built a car that cost more than a Cadillac, came in just 3 colors with only one interior choice, and was turned into a racing legend by a boat engine millionaire from Wisconsin who had never owned a race team a single day in his life. People called it the banker's hot rod, which might be the greatest nickname ever given to any car in American history. This is the story of how it became the most dominant car in American motorsport, and how Chrysler then quietly destroyed it with their own hands. This is the rise and fall of the Chrysler 300 letter series. To understand why this car existed in the first place, you need to understand what Chrysler looked like in the early 1950s. They were building solid, well-made, dependable cars that started every morning and never gave you any trouble. The kind of car your dentist would drive and feel very good about. And that was honestly the problem. While General Motors was selling style and excitement, and Ford was selling the Thunderbird dream, Chrysler was selling pure reliability. That sounds wonderful until you realize that almost nobody under the age of 50 was walking through their showroom doors anymore. To make things worse, the company's president at the time had made headroom his #1 design priority because he wanted a man to be able to sit in the car and wear his hat without hitting the roof. That is not a joke. That was a real and actual design goal at one of the biggest car companies in America. The result was a lineup of cars that looked tall, boxy, and safe, in a way that made young buyers walk straight past the dealership without slowing down. Chrysler knew they had a serious problem, and they needed someone to fix it fast. The man they brought in to change everything was a designer named Virgil Exner, who joined Chrysler in 1949 to lead a brand new styling department that had not existed before he arrived. He came in with a clear vision that he called the forward look, which was all about long hoods, short rear ends, and body lines that were inspired by the look of military fighter jets. He wanted Chrysler's cars to look like they were already moving at speed, even when they were sitting completely still in a parking lot. But Exner also did something that set him apart from every other car designer in America at the time. He actually tested his designs. He ran his tail fin shapes through wind tunnel experiments at the University of Michigan to see what they were really doing to the car at high speed. What he discovered surprised a lot of people. Those large tail fins that everyone assumed were just there to look dramatic were actually making the car more stable at speed by pushing the center of air pressure closer to the middle of the vehicle. The fins were not decoration. They were doing a real and useful job. When a designer over at General Motors heard about what Chrysler was working on for their 1957 lineup and managed to get a look at the designs through a gap in a fence, he was so alarmed by what he saw that he went straight back to his bosses and convinced them to completely reopen and redesign every single car in the General Motors lineup from the bottom of the range all the way up to Cadillac. Every model. All of them. Redone from scratch because of what one designer at Chrysler had created. That is how powerful Virgil Exner's work really was. He did not just impress people. He made the biggest car company in the world stop everything and start over. Exner's approach to building the first Chrysler 300 was what you might politely call creative. He walked through Chrysler's own parts supply and started putting together a car from pieces that already existed. The front end came from the Imperial luxury car, the middle section came from the New Yorker, and the rear came from the Windsor. Then he started taking things off. No hood ornament, no side trim, no backup lights, Nothing that added weight or slowed the car down. He fitted the most powerful engine Chrysler had, which was the famous Hemi V8, and tuned it with twin 4-barrel carburetors and a performance exhaust system until it produced exactly 300 horsepower. That number became the name. The C300 was born, and it was the first American production car to ever hit 300 horsepower. It came in black, red, or white, with one interior choice, which was tan leather. You wanted air conditioning? Not available. You wanted options? There were barely any. This car was not built to be comfortable. It was built to be fast. Then came Carl Kiekhaefer, a millionaire from Wisconsin who had built his fortune making Mercury outboard boat motors and held over 200 patents. He decided that NASCAR racing would be a brilliant way to advertise his boat engines, because winning on the track would sell more motors to people who watched racing. So he bought a fleet of brand-new Chrysler 300s and showed up at Daytona Beach in 1955 with matching uniforms for his crew, enclosed transporters for his cars, and a dedicated support truck packed with every spare part imaginable. This was NASCAR in the 1950s, where most teams drove their race cars to the track on public roads and changed their own tires in the pits. Kiekhaefer rolled in like a military operation, and everyone stopped and stared. He needed a driver and found one standing nearby named Tim Flock, a former champion who had retired and was just there to watch. Kiekhaefer reportedly offered him $40,000 for the season, which in 1955 was very serious money. Flock looked at the car, looked at the money, and came out of retirement on the spot. What followed was one of the most dominant seasons in American motorsport history, with Flock and the Chrysler 300 winning 18 out of 39 races and taking the Grand National Championship by a margin that was not even close. That single-season win record stood for 12 years until Richard Petty broke it. The cars kept getting faster and more powerful through the late 1950s and into the early 1960s, with the engine growing larger and more advanced with each new model. But then Chrysler made a decision that slowly destroyed everything they had built. In 1962, they introduced a cheaper version of the 300 that looked almost identical to the real thing and could be optioned with most of the same features for over $1,000 less. The whole identity of the letter series had been built on exclusivity, on being the one Chrysler that was genuinely special and different from everything else in the showroom. Drop a comment if you have ever seen one of these in person, and subscribe if you want more stories like this one every week.